Good morning, good evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends. And I am here to speak with you about opening your mind a little more, becoming aware that transformation is something we are all going through. Now, you've met Jeanne and you've been seeing her every day recently when I'm online, so I don't need to say much about her. And I don't need to say much about Victor because he's been here 2 or 3 times now. But Bob Choat, you may have forgotten. I haven't had him here for a long time. He told me he was working. I don't know if that's true or not, but if he says he is, I have to accept it. In any case, today we are talking about transformation. And whether you realize it or not, we are all transforming, we are all growing, we are all evolving. And that's what makes life so very interesting. What we were yesterday, we are not today. Our bodies are all, the cells in our bodies are constantly dying and being born again. So, having said that, Jeannie, can I get you to take over for a few moments?
Sure. We've been having a great series of conversations, and last week we attempted to unpack manifestation. So it makes great sense that we talk about transformation and the purpose of going through change. And Marianne Williamson said personal transformation can and does have global effects as we go. So goes the world, for the world is us. The revolution that will save the world is ultimately a personal one. And the great American philosopher Naomi Campbell said, it's a new challenge to see how people can change your look. I like words like transformation, reinvention, and chameleon, because one word I don't like is predictable. I bring the two of them up because they're very different takes on the word transformation. One, somewhat superficial, and the other very deep. And I think when we talk about transformation, or sometimes I like to say metamorphosis, it's on both levels. So that's what I wanted to kind of kick off the discussion with. Dr. Bob, how's that sound with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, you probably have heard about Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero with Thousand Faces, and he talks about the hero's journey. And part of that hero's journey is when a hero goes into the abyss, the great challenge, and comes out of it. Once he's able to, or she's able to conquer that abyss, comes out transformed. So that's where the transformation that Joseph Campbell talks about. So I'm going to ask everybody here, what is your own take on a hero's journey and going through the transformation and coming out of the other side?
Victor, you want to jump in on that?
Jump in? Oh, I was waiting for him to finish the sentence. Would you mind repeating the question? Because I thought you were talking about a hypothetical situation, and I was waiting for the rest of it. So
no, yeah. So if you watched Star Wars, because Joseph Campbell had a big influence on Star Wars with George Lucas and everything, and George Lucas had it written one way, and then had the hero's journey incorporated into what we know as that first Star Wars movie, and we know that Luke Skywalker became that hero, but had to go through all these different stages in the hero's journey. You know, meeting the mentor, but he had to accept it at first, and then going through that, and then going through the challenges, then coming out transformed, eventually becoming what he became. So when we talk about the transformation part of the hero's journey, what are your insights or your thoughts or even your experiences? Because I know that, Victor, you had a lot of experiences and you faced challenges in your life in order to grow. Like you said, you in essence have a PhD in life. So what are the kind of transformations you've gone through um, through the challenges that you faced?
One of the main things that I dealt with was just feeling good, just feeling normal. Everyone has urges and tendencies and things that we experience, and until we realize that it is what we are thinking about that governs those feelings, then we're at the mercy of those feelings. And from a personal level, if my feelings are running amok and I'm not controlling them, then everyone around me is going to be impacted by how I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling good, they're going to be feeling good. And if I'm feeling not good, then they're going to be feeling some other way. Transformation for me has been and is coming to terms with the fact that everything affects everything else, and there's really no right or wrong way to be except to be me. And I'm in control of how I feel by what I think. So essentially, the more control I can exert over what I'm thinking, the more control I can exert over how I'm feeling. And my feeling, I guess, spurs me to do certain things. And those things I do, they determine what happens to me or what comes toward me in the grand old seed time and harvest principle. There was a time when I'd wake up in the morning and be so disappointed that I was still here. Now when I wake up in the morning, I look for who am I going to influence now? Because somebody needs to hear what I got to say. Somebody needs to know what I know.
And that's the point. We don't always recognize that. And whether we're working on a transformation or not, it is still happening. And many people, including myself, have felt, what do I have to offer? I sit and talk all day. Is it of value? So how did you change that, shift that to saying, hey, I have value, I am going to offer it, and I really don't care what anyone else thinks? Victor.
For me, it's a constant renewing on an hour by hour, day by day basis. Somehow, I came to the discovery that I was in charge of my feelings. And I guess, for lack of a more definable moment, having the parents that I did and having the influence that I did had led me to this place. For that they're having, but in the early part of that journey, you are skewed towards experiencing pleasure. And when you are skewed toward experiencing pleasure, you really don't get to learn the things that you need to learn that's going to help you transform your life because you're so caught up on pleasure. In the early part of the journey, pleasure was my goal. Well, now pleasure is no longer my goal, but pleasure is a byproduct of the goals that I'm going after.
So, how are you, and I'm picking on you now a little, how do you help people understand that?
Once you discover what works for you, once you discover something that in my category tend to behave a certain way. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm a black person, right?
Not a clue.
And as a black person,
can I ask you a question about that? Because this
sure.
is an issue that I had with my mom all my life. because I grew up in an integrated situation. And my mom would say, "Is that person black?" My answer was, "That person's purple or maybe pink." I don't remember, Mom. How does that make you feel?
How does your conversation with you and your mom make me feel?
Not only the conversation, but you said, "I don't think you noticed that I am black."
See,
And
when you're black, there are external forces, external conversations that describe you a certain way for people who are not black. And it's very easy to be tossed one way or another by those external forces. Fortunately, my parents helped me understand that the life that I was living was going on inside of me, and that what's happening inside of me is going to impact what happened on the outside of me. Because of my parents, I never really got in touch with the fact that I was a black person. I was just a kid. And and in my life, being a kid was worse than being black because being a kid, you couldn't say anything. You had to be seen and not heard. So while I was busy dealing with the fact of being a kid and not having any value, quote unquote, this whole thing about me being a black person, that never even came into the discussion.
that,
Because when I was a kid, you shut up until we asked you a question. And I was busy dealing with that for a long time. It is only as I got older that the fact that I was black became noticeable, because the people that I was spending my time around weren't black. And since you tend to look at things that are different from you as being different from you, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and if we get caught up in our life and our journey, then we might think that people that don't look like us, act like us, talk like us are different from us. But it takes you quite a while to realize that the real Victor is not even human. The real Victor is the spirit. The real Carla is the spirit. The real Dr. Bob is the spirit. The real Jeanne is the spirit. The real people that we are, we're just wearing this stuff on the outside so we can move around in this earthly realm where we are. Because the things that make us who we are things that you can't see, you can't hear, you can't touch, you can't smell. And that's the spiritual nature of this journey that we're taking. And as you go further on your transformation, you begin to realize that, you begin to learn that. And the toughest part about the transformation is managing the people around you that are not actively in transformation. Because the people around you that are not actively in transformation, they may have issues with you as you go through your transformation, because you're not being held in the context that they are. And you're not picking on me when you ask me a question. I want to be talking. In fact, if I had somebody follow me around for 24 hours a day with the camera and the microphone, that would be the best case scenario for me.
okay, but your transformation, and I should also get it to Bob and Jeanne, but I'm going to bug you for a tiny bit longer. Did you, and I'm sure you didn't realize it as you were growing, but now when you look at it, did you see that your transformation had been happening every moment of the day, or even by the day you were moving to being who you are now?
Well, yeah, I've noticed it from years ago, but my transformation got cranked up to warp speed after I went to this educational seminar that basically really put me on the track that I'm on now, which at the end of the seminar, they said to us, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's what you want to know. This is why you came. This is why you spent your money. Are you ready?" And they said, and this really was released for me. This was, and it is meaningless. That life is empty and meaningless. Now, when they said that, a lot of people in the seminar bust out crying. Some other people in the seminar looked lost. For me, it was like about 10 or 20 seconds. I went, "Why, yeah. Yeah!" Any meaning that exists is the meaning that I created. Several people can have the same experience, and at the other side of that same experience, you have a diverse assessment of what went down. And the assessment that you choose is on you. There's only one expert on Victor Irving Jenkins, and he's me. And there's only one occupation for Victor Irving Jenkins, and that's being Victor Irving Jenkins. Other but there's nobody being Victor. So once I found out that the meaning that I was experiencing was coming out of my head, out of my spirit, then I started creating different meanings. And I started to pay less attention to the input that I was getting from outside myself. Because people always have an opinion, they always share it with you. And if you allow yourself to be changed by what something happens on the outside of you, then you're not really living your best life. Now you take some heat for that because some people call you arrogant, some people say you don't care, but it's okay because that's only their opinion as well.
And that's the whole point. Everyone gets stuck in the opinions of others instead of the opinion of us. Bob?
Yeah, I completely, yeah. That is key. I think when we allow others to tell us to dictate everything on what we should or should not do, then in essence we stop our own personal transformation instead of looking as Victor really stated well in terms of look within yourself and again listen to what kind of mind chatter that we're having, because a lot of times when we think we're looking into ourselves but we have this chattering going on, it's just another form of other opinions, and it could extend back from our childhood and then our friends around us, our so-called friends, toxic people, and everybody else. But again, people's opinions, they really don't matter. What really matters, as Victor said, is our opinions of ourselves. And when we can have a much better opinion, we raise our value, as you said earlier, Carla. Raising that value is going to be key as part of that transformation. Then once we come out of the other side of the transformation, that's when we have the aha moments, the revelation, everything like that. That's where growth actually occurs. We go through the transformation and then we go into the growth part, and then we can start the journey all over again. I know I've gone through it, I don't know, countless times throughout my life. 8 years in the Marines with the LAPD, that short time I was there, starting multiple businesses, and my martial arts since I was 18 months old all the way through to present. I'm continuing evolving even in that area, and just doing like multiple things. How can I challenge myself to the next part and continue to do that now?
Jeannie?
Take a deep breath. There are moments of inflection that become milestones or story arcs for each of us. And one of them that I went through recently, because Carla, I struggle with the inner talk as much as you talk about it. I struggle with it too, because I think everybody does. We don't want to admit to it, but it happens. And I think I've told you, I've named one of the voices David Letterman in my head because he's very snarky. That's the one that would come off with the sarcasm, and if I said it out loud, people would laugh, but it's really mean. So I keep it inside. And it's the one that usually says, why the heck do you think you can do this? And one time I was in the car driving to a Toastmasters event of all things. I had two other ladies in the car with me, and we were talking about that inner voice. And I said, yeah, oftentimes, when I sit down to write, I get this voice that says, nobody wants to hear from you. And immediately, both of them at the same time said, we do. And having that response from them kind of shut that voice up for me and made it a little easier for me to state an opinion and not flinch back, because as Victor said, we grew up, a lot of us grew up with children are supposed to be seen and not heard. So even in my professional life, if there was somebody of a certain level telling me to knock it off, I would, because I would react to my father that way. He told me to do something and I would do it. And then after going through this little moment of transformation, somebody who is very high up in the corporate structure said something a little derogatory. And I said back to him, how's that working for you? Which was somewhat snarky because everybody started laughing, but it was me putting a stake down that I'm valuable. You need to listen to me. Not only that, I'm your PR person. You have to listen to me. So it made a difference in that relationship. And when we find those moments, I think we need to celebrate them, because they're hard. They're hard for us. It's hard for us to get out of our comfort zone. And when you take that one step out of your comfort zone, you need to celebrate it. You need to let it kind of blossom out there so that you can take the next step and the next step, and it gets easier and easier. But taking that first step, I can't imagine what a caterpillar goes through inside the cocoon to turn into a butterfly. But the end result is beautiful. But I know there has to be a lot of pain in that whole process, because they're changing their body every single cell. Well, we do that too. One of the best movie scenes I can think of about transformation was in Cocoon. I think it was a Ron Howard film. And the beings from the other planet were around the elders, and they were making the elders better. They weren't as old anymore. They were able to swim. They were able to walk. They had a lot more energy. And then there's the scene where you actually see them as they really are. They were beings of light, and they were flying around and into the pool. And it was so when the elders went into the pool that they got that healing. So they were leaving some of their energy behind in the pool. But when they were going around in beings of light, I remember going, that's the best picture of spirit that I can think of. And when I think of myself as a spirit, I think of that kind of light being. And that was before I started my spiritual path. It was before I opened up my mind to anything other than what I was taught as a kid. And that's one of those, what I call transformational pivot points, because it made me open to new ideas. And that's really what transformation is, being open to new ideas. The ones that you love, you follow through. The ones that you don't, you leave behind. Yeah, it's a philosophy. Take what you can and leave the rest. And I will tell you what Victor said about others trying to hold you back is very true, because when you start to change, the people around you don't like it. Makes them a little bit uncomfortable, like you're moving on from them. And that's okay. In fact, I actually said to my family who was trying to hold me back, that's okay, I got this. I need to do this. And I remember my mother saying, I don't understand this at all. And I said, Mom, you don't need to understand it. I do. And I came from a very, not strict, but pretty strict Catholic background, and here I am talking about a philosophy that's so not taught in the Catholic Church. And my mother was saying, and my favorite is when she said something about, there's always, if you don't do certain things, you will go to hell. And I said, but Mom, hell's the dump outside of Jerusalem. And you told me my bedroom was a dump. So I figure I've been in hell for a long time. And you can imagine. But that's how I changed my own perspective. For me now, hell is a state of chaos and heaven is a state of peace. And whether there's a a hell or a heaven outside of our realm, as we've been taught in religion, it doesn't matter. To me, what matters is, am I in chaos or am I in peace? And when I made that shift, there was a whole bunch of guilt and angst and fear that just peeled away from me, just peeled away. And I actually tell people it's the adult way of looking at Catholicism or religion or any other philosophy. You don't have all those feelings about it because now you can look at it, understand it, and move forward. And it's not an easy place to get to, but I had a lot of people trying to pull me back because, my soul. And I said, that's okay. My soul is in peace right now. My soul is at peace. So let me go do what I want to do, which is look at other philosophies. It's not an easy thing to do. So I say, take one step, kind of let it get that equilibrium back. Then you take another step, and then you take another step. And pretty soon you're going to be totally surprised at how far you've come. And I did this in the work world because I managed change management communication. And I would say to the executives, we're just going to do a series of meetings. And they'd go, okay, I can do meetings. And then we start doing the agendas of what we're doing in the meetings, and we make a few decisions. And, literally at the end of 1 year, the guy said, so what did we accomplish? And I said, well, there's the one level. We had 18 meetings. We brought in 35 different people. We have 3 of the 15 plans written. And he said, what but? I said, I have 56 people who understand what change management is now. And he was like, oh my God, because I never told him I'm coming in to change the world. I said, we're going to have meetings and we're going to take this one step at a time. And I was able to do that because in my own life, I was doing that one step at a time.
Makes plenty of sense. If the people out there have any questions, just type it in and we'll try to bring them in.
I'm curious, both Jeanne and Victor, as each of you have gone through your own transformations and your growth as well, and you talked about the people in your lives, particularly in the past, how has your inner circle changed in the last, from what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or farther back versus what it is now, or has it changed?
Is that a joke? Is he trying to be funny? Well, of course. Many years ago, my inner circle is completely changed. In fact, there's only a handful of people in my life that I've known over a few years, and this actually is quite predictable. Because the people who have known me a long time, they don't know me because they know me as how I was. In fact, people who know me in the most recent time, like the year or two, I've been on an exponential growth spurt during this period of time. So the people that's known me less know me better than the people who knew me. There are people that knew me when I had a bad temper. I don't have a bad temper anymore. There were people who knew me when my self-esteem was in the tank. I don't have that problem anymore. There are people who knew me when I went to Morehouse College in 1970 and discovered the wonder of marijuana and flunked out of college. That's not the same person that I am right now. There are people that knew me when I was in the military. When I was in the military, I absolutely had no respect for personal growth. I had no respect for responsibility, and I have respect for those things now. Not in an inordinate way, but in a way that helps me understand that there's a reason why I'm in one rank or why I'm in one position and someone else is not. I get the idea of qualifying to be something and then being that something and then walking in that something as opposed to just treating it like it was just some old thing. So my inner circle, yes, it has changed considerably, and I appreciate the change that it has considerably. One of the things, particularly, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s in the thick of the civil rights struggle in America. And it's nothing like how it is now. People who are my age, that talk like I used to talk and think like I used to think 30, 40 years ago, they must be drinking the wrong beer or something. Because if you think about things the same way you did 30, 40 years ago, then you've wasted your 30, 40 years. So naturally, I think different things, and so I spend my time around different people by virtue of the law of attraction. What you think about, you bring about. Now I think about things that have more to do with Christianity, more to do with my spiritual life, more to do with God, more to do with being the best person that I can be, rather than getting as many people to like me as I can, which is the way it used to be. But the paradox is, by spending my time being the best person that I can be, the quality of the people in my life has shot through the roof. So if you're in my life, if you're part of my life, I'm talking to you, and you know that you rock.
Yeah, I think Victor describes it quite well. You grow, and people either grow with you or they grow elsewhere. So I try to keep some touchstones to my past. So obviously family. As a military brat, growing up, and we moved like every 2 or 3 years. My inner circle were my brothers and sisters for a long time. We're not that close, all of us. We've all grown apart. I often used to say to my mom, I don't know how you did it, because if we were in school today, every single one of us, all 7 of us, would have been put on Ritalin, because we were all highly intelligent, highly motivated, bouncing off the walls kind of kids. But as I got into high school and settled into a place, I had a small group of friends, but there's only one that's a touchstone for the rest of that group. So periodically I'll go to a reunion and meet people. They don't know me at all. They have no idea what I've done as an adult. And I don't find it necessary to tell them unless they ask. And when they ask, then I'm happy to spend as much time as they want. But it's because we all had different lives. We've all grown different and separate. I have a handful of friends that I can call on at any time of day or night. We all need to have a small number of those really inner circle people. And I have probably a broader circle of people who know me and think they know me, but I'm quite aware of how much they know of me, so that I don't share some of those deep inner things with them, because they're more acquaintances. And as I grew into an adulthood, and I didn't really become an adult until my 50s, to be honest with you. I clearly know I grew up with my son. I healed a lot of my childhood traumas as my son went through phases. I could say, oh, that's why I feel this way. And then working him through it, like when he had a learning disability, or he had a problem with a new love when he was a teenager. I could work through some of my own stuff by just thinking about it as he was going through it. So I don't claim adulthood to my late 40s, early 50s. And that's when I realized that it's all on me. It's how I react or respond. And I often say it's that between that stimulus and the response, you get to choose heaven or hell. You get to choose to react chaotically and emotionally, or you get to choose to respond thoughtfully and deliberately. I choose thoughtfully and deliberately. And that put me in a different space. So I'll tell you, Dr. Bob, I did a lot of crisis communications for technology companies. They would go, "You're so calm through it all." Yeah, I taught myself to be thoughtful and deliberate, not to go, "Oh my God, the sky is falling." Even though inside I'm saying the sky is falling, I'm going, okay, let's look at what's the real issue. What is it that we need to know? And I could walk them through it. I got that not from any training, and I have my degree in communications and all that. I got that from raising a 2-year-old throwing temper tantrums. There are certain things you can do and certain things you can't. And I tell you what, my grandson is teaching me new lessons because he's in that stage now. But we can learn from those in our inner circle because we can let them see us. And I think one of the most striking and best gifts we can give to somebody is to say, I see you and I hear you. Because we have so much going on that we don't see each other for who we are. We see each other for who we think we are. I might think Victor is just a really fun, roly-poly kind of guy that we have a great time with, but he's an actual 360 human being. He probably has some struggles, and we need to recognize that. I know Carla tells us in this program that she struggles with certain things, and I really appreciate her openness and her ability to be vulnerable, because that's teaching other people that it's okay to be vulnerable. Because if we're vulnerable, we get to learn. If we, I don't know who said it, kind of be standoffish because we're shy, we don't learn because people don't come up to us. I mean, I don't think I'm arrogant, but I tend to be introverted, and people think I'm standing off and being stuck up, and that they've learned over time that has nothing to do with what you see. It has to do with me being an introvert. I don't step out, and when I finally get comfortable, then you can't shut me up. But, I have to be comfortable. But that's who I am. And I became comfortable letting people know that. So I think that our inner circles are very important, because that gives us the support that we need. Because as much as we know it's an inner game and we have to do this pretty much by ourselves, you still need to have the outer validation and support. And that's who gets to be in your inner circle. Those people that can validate you positively, give you positive feedback, and help you transform, because we're transforming every moment of the day. We're changing. I think it's 7 years that you change your skin.
Yeah.
So just, even on a just practical physical way, we're transforming. And I'm happy that some of the skin that's getting a little wrinkly could change. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, we're changing almost every single cell in our body about every 7 years. And yeah, so it's a continuous cycle. And Jeannie, I'm glad that you mentioned about your learning and your growth and your understanding, especially dealing with crisis communication, came from not from education, but what you did with your son and dealing with that. I can recall I think part of my greatest in learning to understand others, when I had the chance to work with a young boy starting at age 12 up to 18 years old, that had low functioning autism. And I learned so much about patience and really getting into learning how he deals in life and everything else versus my formal education. And he taught me so much. And that at that time, for that 6 years, he was part of my inner circle because of what he was able to give to me versus what I was able to give to him. And yeah, that helped me so much. Now, as far as my own personal inner circle, yes, it's changed quite a bit. I don't recall very many people from my early life as part of my, or even on just on the outside of the circle. I've never been to a high school reunion, and I can recall getting the 10th high school reunion, and while I didn't attend it, some of the people that did attend it later on came up to me and they saw me and they called me out and said, "Are you still alive?" I said, "Yes, I'm still alive." Apparently, I was supposed to be dead. Yeah. So at the 10th reunion, they had the book afterwards, and then they had "In Memory of," and I was there as part of it.
Scary.
So I had thought about going to later unions dressed in all white. I was going to paint myself white and just come out as this ghost kind of person. So there's people from my high school that probably still thinks that I'm dead. And, you know, the truth is, as we go through transformations, our old self, who we are, like what Victor said, that person no longer exists.
They actually did.
Yeah. So with me, I'm not there. That person that they knew in their mind, I'm no longer around. So when they see me now as who I am, they're going to see, oh yeah, that's probably somebody with the same name and everything. Yeah. So
looks kind of like him, but can't be
looks
him.
kind of like him. Yep.
I'd like to speak on that. Something that Jeannie said about maybe she's arrogant. Now, arrogance is a jacket that I had worn for many years, and after about 10 years of wearing the jacket and because arrogance is never a compliment, it's usually a criticism. And we've been talking about how other people's opinions and how their ideas can affect you if you let it. For me, after being called arrogant and responding to it for so many years, I actually looked up the word in the dictionary. And the definition of arrogance is offensively exaggerating one's own importance, which means that someone who thinks that you are arrogant might themselves be sort of timid. And because they see you how they see you, since you carry yourself as though you're more important than they carry themselves, it's pretty easy for them to characterize you as being arrogant. I've also found over the course of time that offense, whether or not you are offended, is subjective, right? It's subjective because there's nothing that's inherently offensive, although all of us consider certain behavior as inherently offensive. Well, nothing really in and of itself is inherently offensive, and there are things that I think would just be terrible and be offensive. This criticism of being arrogant is something that I have learned to deal with over the course of time. Now, anyone who's watching, who know anyone that they consider arrogant, might do well to consider another point of view. What I have found over the course of time during my transformation is that anyone that I don't resonate with, or anyone that I don't warm up to for some reason or another, the characteristic they have that I'm not warming up to is also a characteristic that I have. And if you find yourself being quote unquote offended by something, it is the time to look at yourself. You can take another growth spurt then, because the reason that you don't warm up to that person, other people don't warm up to you for a similar reason. And so the only two things that you can do, you can either embrace the fact that you're that way, or you could try to change to effect a different response from different people. I vote for accepting the fact that you're who you are. So anyone that describes me as arrogant probably gets described as arrogant by people that they know. That's just an observation. You might want to check it out in practice and see if it holds water. But that criticism is one of the ones that I have drawn a line through and crossed it off my list, because whenever I get described as arrogant, or whenever I try to think that I'm arrogant, I just remember it's a point of view. Nothing more, nothing less.
Correct. In fact, you just well stated Carl Jung's work in the shadow. So the projection that others have upon you, or that we have upon others, is simply our shadow self exposing itself. Perfectly love the way you stated it, Victor.
And the point is, I look at my inner circle, and even in 4 years, the past 10 years, I've been throwing people out slowly but surely. But in the past 4 years, my inner circle has totally changed. The people I talk to, because many of the people who were in my circle were very negative people and would say, "Oh, Carla, you can't do that." Or, "Carla, that's really stupid." And I got to the point that I didn't want to hear that anymore. I wanted to live my life as I wanted to and not in order to make them happy. And that changed everything about the people I talk to, the people who are around me. I have a dear friend who gets very concerned, "You're stuck in the house." Well, many people are because of COVID. Come on, and I said that to him. But then he said, "Do you ever get out with your friends?" And I thought for a moment and I said, "I've thrown them all out with the dishwater. No." And it kind of changed everything, even in our conversations. Because although I would say, "Yeah, I have this friend," and I'm like, "But I haven't spoken to the friend in months. And if I speak to her, maybe I'll speak to her maybe every few months instead of every day," because I wanted to get away from that mindset. So as we're changing and we're growing, I think it's very normal for us to decide, okay, you're not where I want you to be or where I want to be. And I need to get away from that. A friend died, and a friend from another city called me to tell me, and she began talking about something, and it was very negative. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to go there anymore. And I told her that. And that was the last time I heard from her. What do you do? As you grow, your inner circle changes. Has anyone else had that experience?
I would say, Carla, that as we grow, we need to recognize that what we say and what we do, other people react to, but that's not our responsibility, that's their responsibility. So I have had friends that have reacted poorly to some of the changes that I've made. And it was their choice to leave my inner circle, not mine necessarily. But they didn't want to be around all this, what they called chaos, because I was changing. And I'll be honest with you, I was told that by a therapist when my ex-husband was going through rehab. The therapist that I had to go see had told me that things are going to change. Things are going to change drastically. If you take this therapy to heart, you're going to be losing friends, and you need to be okay with that. And I didn't quite understand until the first time we were with some old friends, and all they wanted to do was drink. And I'm like, we can't do that. Not right now. And they didn't understand because they couldn't see the world from our perspective, that was detrimental to the ex-husband. And I had to put my foot down. So I became the battle axe, or another word that started with a B. And I said, I wear that with a great, great grin. I wear that proudly, because this is my life, not yours. You get to make the choice. And that's one of the things that I talk about when I talk about communication. You get to breathe, to be grounded before you even speak. You get to listen to people and hear them, and really hear them, but you also get to choose how you respond or react. And it's up to each of us to be responsible for how we respond. So those that are not in my life know one thing about me, and I always think it's because the way I grew up moving around so much, but I have friends that are, I might not talk to for 4 years, but when they call, it's like no time has passed. Yeah, and it's not that we hated each other and broke up. It's that we had different lives, especially when we all had children and had to do all the school stuff and you're working and it got really busy, so you lose touch. That's one thing versus somebody who says to you, I don't like how you're changing. I don't, I basically are saying, I don't have any control over you anymore. And you say, well, you never did. So what's your point? And they will just nicely fluff off and go in their way and find their own new people. But that's where we can get to discern who's in charge. You're in charge of how you feel. You're in charge of how you react. You're in charge of how you show up in the world. Those people that show up in a way that you're not comfortable with, they get to choose to move on or to change to be with you. That's the choice. Change to be in this inner circle or move on. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's part of what I think we need to get more comfortable with. I think in the old days when you lived with all of your family all in the same area, there was a different kind of dynamic, because you had cousins and aunts and uncles and everybody's in everybody's business. And we could only stay a certain way because they keep you in a role. But we don't have that anymore. We're a very fluid society now. So we have to take the responsibility to take the steps that we need to survive, to thrive, and to help others do the same. So I tell you, when I divorced myself from guilt way back when, that was a huge transformational moment, because then it was okay for me to be me, and it was okay for you to be you. And there was no heart-tugging emotion between us, right? My friends recognize that now, and the ones who don't understand that we might have some words periodically, because I'll say, you don't get to do that anymore. And they'll say, but, and I'll go, no buts, you don't get to do that anymore. If you want to be my friend, you're going to love me for who I am. And that was really hard to come to.
Well, same thing with me. I didn't throw them out. I just noticed that there's no conversation now. And if there is, it picks up where it left off. And yet it doesn't go as far as it used to, because I don't allow that to happen. I'm very careful. Guys, do you want to say something? Because we are closing in 5 minutes. Victor? No, let Bob go first and then.
Really?
No, I'm
really
going to
just
let.
wanted you to laugh like that, Victor.
Bob?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And when we look at our own transformation, and as each one of you have stated, who are you associating with right now? And that will show you the level of transformation where you're currently at, because we have completely grown or we have not grown. If we're still hanging around the guy who still talks about high school like Al Bundy, then we're stuck in that area in terms of our own growth and everything, or ungrowth or not growth, or whatever you want to call it. But I like to look at who am I associating with right now, because it shows me where I'm currently at.
I agree. Okay, Victor.
well, clearly, the person that you are on the inside, the person that your thoughts define you to be, is the person that's going to show up when you do. And people are going to respond to that person. You impact the person that shows up by what you think the majority of the time. Case in point, I used to be a registered nurse working in a trauma center. I worked up on the floor, and everyone in the hospital, the big hospital, they wore medical scrubs. The doctors wore medical scrubs. The people from housekeeping wore medical scrubs. The people working in the kitchen, they all had on the same medical scrubs, and all you knew about them was they worked in a hospital somewhere. Now, from time to time, the ICU unit where I work, I'd have to go downstairs to the emergency room to pick up a patient that made it through the emergency workout, and they're now going to be taken up to ICU, and they couldn't be without a nurse for any length of time. So as a nurse, I would go down to the emergency room, pick the patient up, and roll them on the gurney back upstairs. Now, the ward secretary in an emergency department, they run the show. They're a secretary, but they know everybody's job, and they know what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. And right about the time that I showed up, she was expecting someone from housekeeping to come and clean up some mess that they had in the emergency room. Now, I told you guys earlier that I was black, and just in case you forgot that, I'm black, right? The people that work in housekeeping, many of them were black, many of them were Hispanic. And when I walked in, she thought she could check off her box. She said, there you are, housekeeping. And she looked at me for about 6/7 of a second. And just from looking at me, and I walked in. So she looked at me and said, housekeeping. And as soon as the words left her mouth, she knew I wasn't from housekeeping. And she goes, oh, no, you're not housekeeping. And I didn't have to throw her out. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to correct her. And the reason I didn't have to correct her is because I showed up as Victor Irving Jenkins, registered nurse, critical care nurse, somebody who knows what's up, somebody who can handle business. And when I walked in, she knew. She wasn't surprised after a few seconds that I didn't have a mop, because I was not from housekeeping. So whoever you are in here, whoever you carry yourself a certain way, people are going to respond to you just like that. And in a certain way, people who treat you as less than what you think you are, for just you in spaced repetition. I'm great. I'm loved. I'm all that in a bag of chips. And you keep doing that until the person inside of you and the ones outside of you, until they start to jail. Because when you see me in a couple of years from now, I'm going to be a different guy from how I am, but not as good as I'm going to be, because I constantly improve.
Jeannie?
We all have a butterfly inside of us, and it's up to us to see it, believe it, and be it. And it just takes a little bit of work on our part, and we can transform into that butterfly.
And the point is, we are all transforming every day.
Every single day.
And every single moment we're transforming. So decide how you want to transform. If you want to transform in a positive way, go for it. If you don't, it won't. It's up to you to decide where you're going. We'll be back on Thursday to talk more about transformation. And if you want to come laugh, come to my laughter challenge on Facebook at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great day, people. We need to sign off. Let's wave goodbye. Come on, Victor. And we are going